Wolverhampton Wanderers take on West Ham United tomorrow night at the Molineux at 7:30. Now, it's a very interesting game, of course. The likes of Totti Gomez are suspended, and I do think it will be a very interesting one to see if Vitor Pereira does change things up. Now, let's get straight into my predicted lineup, the lineup I'd like to see, and a bit about the game itself. Now, this is the lineup that I think I'd like to see tomorrow. I don't know if it will be this one. He could stay unchanged and he could just try and get Larson that bit of momentum to score a goal and stuff like that. But I have gone with Sasa Kalajic up front. Now, that might seem controversial, but for me, I just don't really rate Hwang that much. And I think we potentially could see Hwang play off the left where Arias is at the moment. But for me, I've gone with Arias in the side because I do think, again, he's one of these players that has been subbed off early against Bournemouth, and I think he could do with getting up and running and getting a full game under his belt for Wolves, to be honest. Now, Sasa Kalajic, for me, I think is a very interesting one. I'd love to see him get minutes, mainly because, as I've said, Hwang's not good enough, and I think Larson's in a bit of a sticky patch, and I think he could do far worse than throwing Kalajic in against West Ham United, to be quite honest, especially when they're so poor defensively. I actually think he could cause them a hell of a lot of problems, and their centre-halves aren't great in the air, if we're being completely honest. Now, I think the rest of the back three, I think this is pretty straightforward. Now, of course, you could throw Mosquera in there, but he just isn't going to be fit. So, for me, I've gone Bueno, Agbadou, Doherty. Now, Bueno defending this left channel, we have seen before, it does not go very well whatsoever, unfortunately. And generally, playing right-sided centre-backs as a left-sided centre-back just don't really work. He's one of these players that's very heavily reliant on his right foot. So, for me, I don't really like the idea of it, but equally there's not that many options as you'll see on the bench. They're the players that I think will feature on the bench for Wolves, and I don't think he'll be playing there really that much. Obviously, we could potentially see something where Muller-Wolfer is that third centre-back, and we see Bueno here, which is a very interesting one, but I haven't gone for that just yet. I do think he will throw Santiago Bueno in there. Now, Agbadou, he needs to fix up. He needs to have a good game here. And I think, so same with Doherty as well. Doherty's okay, but he obviously got booked against Adley, giving the ball away cheaply against Bournemouth. But overall, I thought he was one of the better players against Manchester City as well, which doesn't really say a hell of a lot. But as I've said, I think that will be the back three, mainly because there's not that many options. And then Jose Sarr in goal. I just don't see Wolves playing Dan Bentley, to be honest, in a game where realistically Wolves will want a cup run this season, especially if they are going to be under the cosh and be in and around that relegation spots the rest of the season, which I don't think they will be, but I think for now it would be nice to get through this round of the cup. Then, I've gone for Jackson Tachua at right back, which I think is pretty straightforward. He looked really good when he came on, to be fair, the other day. Looked really promising in his first few minutes for Wolves, and I'm sure most people would like to see him get a full 90 minutes. Of course, Kiana Herver is now injured. I do think we could potentially see Rodrigo Gomez over there as well, but personally I'd go with Tachua to give him a full game in the Cup as well, to get him up to the speed of Premier League intensity, because ultimately it's against Premier League opposition. And then the two in midfield, I've gone for Andre and Joao Gomez. It just shows when you don't have Andre in there, Wolves look so light in midfield. They look like there's no bite, there's no real fight in there. Joao Gomez has got that fight, but he can't do it all by himself against a potentially a midfield three that West Ham will be playing. And generally, I just think that them two need to play in order for Wolves to have any chance of winning games throughout the rest of this season. So that's why I've gone for them. I would not be surprised if we did see a Manetzi in there or a Bellegarde in there. I don't think Bellegarde had a particularly unbelievable game against Bournemouth, but I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck with him. Maybe he'd take Joao Gomez out because he's played a hell of a lot of football, especially throughout pre-season and, of course, the start of this season as well. So we could see Bellegarde for Joao Gomez, but for me, I wouldn't take any risks. I'd play the tried and tested players, the proven ones, and the ones that we know are going to pull out the best sort of results and outcomes for Wolves, really. And then on that left-hand side, David Muller-Wolfer, mainly because I think Bueno probably should be starting in the league. Now that sounds very controversial, but I would probably be playing Hugo Bueno against Everton. So Muller-Wolfer for me is probably the smartest option, especially with Iliman Ndiaye playing off that right-hand side. It depends who Everton bring in on that right-hand side as well, because they are linked to a hell of a lot of players on that sort of flank. But as it stands, they'll have Iliman Ndiaye playing there. So for me, Hugo Bueno is a better matchup against Iliman Ndiaye than Muller-Wolfer is in terms of their strengths against each other. And I do think Muller-Wolfer is probably suited for a game like this and could get a full 90 minutes in as well against West Ham. Then, off the left, Arias, again, another one. I just think he needs that confidence. He needs to be able to play a full game of football, really, for Wolves and get that sort of, that run in the team and get that quality up and get that used to that, again, the Premier League intensity and get used to that. I think playing him in these games is very crucial for his development in English football. So for me, I think it's a no-brainer to play Jean Arias off that left-hand side. As I've said, we could potentially see Mateus Mane. I highly doubt it. We could see Rodrigo Gomez, Jean-Martin Bellegarde, or Hwang Hee-chan in that position, to be fair. So there's a lot of options, but for me, I would like to see Arias personally. Now, off the right, Fer Lopez. The bloke hasn't started a game of football yet in the Premier League. I just think it makes complete sense to play him off that right-hand side. I've been gagging to see him for absolutely ages now, since the Celta Vigo game. We saw him against Manchester City briefly, and he looked sharp when he come on. And for me, I just don't see how he cannot play in this game, given the fact that he has had limited minutes and was an unused substitute, completely unused against Bournemouth. So for me, Fer Lopez makes complete sense. Now, tactically, I do think he makes sense as well for Sasa Kalajic, because he wants to get into these areas and float those balls into this area of the box. John Arias also one of these players that will be arriving in the box, and I do think Sasa Kalajic was cause real issues. If Fer Lopez was putting the ball in this area consistently. I also think he's got that lovely pass in there, especially when he drifts out to here. He's got that lovely pass into Arias, and generally, I'm a big fan of Fer Lopez, and you lot know that, and I want to see him playing for Wolverhampton Wanderers. I really do, and I think he makes sense to, especially in this game. Now, I do think the other options, we'll just explore them very quickly as well. I do think it would be very interesting if we did see a Hwang Hee-chan up front. I think it completely changes the way that Wolves play. To be honest, I don't think he's particularly unbelievable as a 9. I don't think many people want to see him as a 9. I think if you are going to see Hwang, you want to see him off the left, but you can't really play Arias through the middle. He can play there, but just generally, he's not nowhere near as effective through the middle as well. The same way in which, to be fair, he's not as effective off the left, because his best football has always been played in his career through the right. And that will get interesting if Cristante Soucek, obviously the links have come about today as we're recording this, if Cristante Soucek does come back into the lineup, back into this Wolves squad. If he gets into this Wolves squad, I think we will see Arias off that right-hand side, which again begs the question, what happens with Fer Lopez? But we'll talk about that in another video. So I do think we could see Hwang Hee-chan, of course. I do think we could equally see John Bellegarde in that position as well. And as I've said, we potentially could see Rodrigo Gomez in that position, but we could also see Rodrigo Gomez out here for Jackson Tachua or Malavolfa, which I don't think he will be playing off that side. I think it'll be Bueno as the backup option for him. But I do think there's a few interesting ways that Wolves could attack this game. The way they could set up could be interesting as well. And I want to briefly touch on another way that I think they could potentially set up. Now, this might seem controversial, but I have seen it a hell of a lot on Twitter. I wouldn't do it whatsoever, personally. But I know people want to see something different because it's not really worked at the start of the season. But people are asking to see this. Now, Malavolfa did play in a back four at AZ Alkmaar, so that could make sense. The only issue is Wolves have then got bodies to ultimately, try and make up in this side. And I do think it'd be very interesting if we did see something similar to this. Now, I think with that, you could probably see a Larson. Maybe you'd see an Arias off the left, a Lopez through the middle, and a Larson up front, potentially. I do think you could see something like that as well. Again, I wouldn't play a back four, personally. I just wouldn't do it, especially with those as the back four, to be honest, especially when considering, Malavolfa does want to be advanced. Now, he was advanced at AZ Alkmaar, but also Jackson Tachua's best game is bombing up and down that flank as well. So I don't see how they can operate that effectively, both bombing on, as well as having Bueno and Agbadou at the back, when especially Bueno's not blessed with pace. He's just not one of these centre-backs that's particularly blessed with pace. Doesn't defend the channels particularly well either. Hence why the reason I'm not that keen on Agbadou either, because I think Agbadou doesn't defend channels well at all either. So if you're playing both of them players, and you're going to have the likes of Jared Bowen potentially, you might have Lucas Paquetá, you might have Nicholas Fulker, who's got an elite movement in the middle as well. I just think it's going to cause a lot of problems for Wolves, because if West Ham do have one thing, it's a very, very sharp attack. So I do think we could potentially see something like this, but I personally wouldn't do it. Now, Wolves fans, what do you want to see from this game? Do you want to see a convincing win? Do you just want to see an improvement in performance levels? What do you want to see? For me, I think the most telling thing would be a significant improvements in performance levels. I think the performance against Bournemouth wasn't anywhere near as bad as it was against City, but equally, I don't think, again, it was particularly impressive. I just want to see Wolves looking defensively solid more than anything, because at the end of the day, if you're going to stay in this league, you need to be defensively solid, and Wolves haven't been that. And then being defensively solid gives you that that ability to work on your attacking, and Wolves haven't looked threatening in attack either. And I would be giving Jurgen Strand Larsen the game off this, probably, maybe bring you on in the 70th minute if things aren't going the way that Wolves would like them to. But I just want to see Wolves performing well, because we haven't really seen it that much. We've seen players performing well individually. We've seen Andre performing well yesterday, the day before. And we've seen the likes of João Gomez consistently performing well. He always has. We've seen Bueno performed really well against Bournemouth as well. Tachua played well as well. So I just want to see consistent performance improvements. I want to see Jose Sarr proving himself. I want to see Agbadou proving himself. I want to see all these players that have had shaky starts this season proving himself. I want to see Jean Arias getting on the ball, showing what he can do, because we haven't seen anywhere near enough of it so far. And I think if there's one game that's perfect for it, it is West Ham, because, it is a real test for him, especially if Aaron Wan-Bissaka is the right back on that side. I think there's not going to be many tougher tests for John Arias this season if Wan-Bissaka is starting for West Ham United. And John Arias, if he can get the better of West Ham down that right hand, that right hand side, I do think it'll prove to give him a lot of confidence, and he'll go into the season and get sort of growing in confidence, because, as I've said, Aaron Wan-Bissaka is not a tough task. As much as people might think he is a bit naff because of his time at Manchester United, he really is still one of the hardest defenders 1v1 to beat and get the better of. And I do think Arias will have a real tough test if it is to happen that he plays off that left hand side and Wan-Bissaka is also on that flank. Now, if you did enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel. I hope you enjoyed this match preview. I may potentially be at the game tomorrow. I'm not sure yet, but if you do see me, feel free to say hello. I would appreciate it. But like I said, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.